Good afternoon, everyone, and welcome to the DEFIN-YD Engaging People Living with Young Onset Dementia research event. My name is Dr. Mary O'Malley, and I will be chairing this event today. And I'm a lecturer in Ageing and Dementia at the University of West London. Like many of the speakers today, my area of interest and research is focused on supporting younger people living with dementia from the point of diagnosis onwards. This event today is part of a project called the DEFIN-YD project. DEFIN stands for Dementia Experts for Involvement Network for Younger People with Dementia. This is an 18-month collaborative project, public engagement project, aimed to raise awareness of the different ways in which younger people living with dementia can get involved in research studies. Hopefully, the event today will shed light on some of the examples from across England and also the Netherlands of how researchers have worked together with younger people living with dementia to develop projects. The project also aims to support the creation of a co-research and public involvement network for younger people living with dementia. If this is something that you are interested in, there will be more information about this at the end of the event today. So I can see we've got 92 participants today, so welcome to everyone who has joined so far. There may be a few more joining in the next few minutes. But to begin with, I thought I would give an introduction to the team, the core team in the DEFIN-YD project. Could I have the next slide, please, Jackie? Fantastic, thank you. So this project is a collaborative project and it's led by the University of West London, and it's in collaboration with the University of Northampton. So Professor Jackie Parks, who will be speaking later today, is the project co-lead. And we have two research assistants working on the project, Anna Crawford, based at the University of West London, and Natasha Bays at the University of Northampton. Both Anna and Natasha are working behind the scenes today to make sure everything runs smoothly. I would also like to mention that where this is a collaborative project, we have a number of partners involved too. So we're working closely with UCL, the University of Bradford, and the Young Dementia Network. And finally, we would like to give some special thanks to our funders, the Wellcome Trust, who have enabled this piece of work to happen. So Jackie, next slide. Thank you very much. Okay, so this is the schedule for today's event. So today's event will consist of 5 research talks from different researchers who have developed research with younger people living with dementia. The first talk will be delivered by Dr. Christian Bakker from the Netherlands. And we have Hare and Dr. Wendy Mitchell second, and we've got Professor Oyebode and Clare Mason from the University of Bradford speaking third. We will then have a panel discussion where Christian Bakker, Oyebode and Clare Mason will be joining to answer any of your questions that you have during the event today. And following this panel discussion, we'll have a 15-minute break. I'd also like to mention that for each of these talks that they'll be 20 minutes long, and each talk will have a 5-minute break should you want to stretch your legs and or grab a drink. So after the break, we'll then have 2 further talks, one by Professor Jackie Parks and Alison Ward, Dr. Alison Ward from the University of Northampton, and our last talk today will be by Keith Oliver. So to begin, I would first also like to just really encourage any of the audience members today to put forward any questions you have during the talk in the Q&A box at the bottom of the screen. So if you have any questions at all for the speakers, please do put them forward, and we will be selecting a handful of these to put forward to the speakers in the panel discussions. Apologies in advance if we're unable to answer all of the questions. We have quite a few attendees. I can see we have 103 who have joined today. But we will be saving all of your questions, and we will be referring to them as the project develops. So to start, I'm really delighted to welcome Dr. Christian Bakker. Dr. Christian Bakker is a health psychologist and leader of the Young Dementia Research Programme at the Department of Primary and Community Care at Radboud University Medical Centre in the Netherlands. And his talk is titled "Involving People Living with Young Onset Dementia in Research, Lessons Learned in the Netherlands." Thank you.
Okay, thank you, Mary, for your kind introduction and for having me at this webinar. I'm delighted that the topic of engaging people living with young onset dementia and research is such a topic, because I think it's important that we have people with young onset dementia in the driver's seat when looking at research and research projects. So if you're okay with this, I will go through some of our experiences in the Netherlands with engaging people in research. And please drop your questions in the Q&A so we can answer them in the panel discussion later on. Maybe I can have the next slide, Jackie. Engaging people in research is rather new also in the Netherlands, because most research projects aim at letting people participate in research as a research subject. And there has been a trend of really engaging people in research in the past few years. And fortunately, we have had a few research projects I think are rather successful in engaging people with young onset dementia and their relatives in every step of the research project. So I want to introduce one of those projects to you today. But first, we also discovered that you can engage people living with young onset dementia in research projects, but as a prerequisite, you also have to have something in place on the strategic level. So I go into the strategic level before I talk about the project. Can I have the next slide? In the Netherlands, we have the Young Onset Dementia Knowledge Center, and that's a nationwide center, just as rather similar to Young Dementia UK. And the members are healthcare provider organizations, as well as research centers who have knowledge and experience with research on young onset dementia. And also the Dutch Alzheimer's Society is one of the core members of the Dementia Knowledge Center. And also we have a board who leads the Young Onset Dementia Knowledge Center, and in the board there's also a relative of a person living with young onset dementia. So in a structure of the Knowledge Center, we find it important that also the voice of those living with dementia is heard. And you can see on the slide the aims of the Knowledge Center, and I won't go into detail of all the aims of the Knowledge Center, but also one of the most important aims of the Knowledge Center is supporting research in the area of young onset dementia. So I want to talk to you about a little bit about the strategic choices that we have made as the Knowledge Center in the past few years, which we believe will help engaging people in research projects. Next slide, please. In the Knowledge Center, we have a scientific board, And that's really a rather dull, as a bunch of people sitting around not so pretty a table as in the picture. And those people are representatives of research groups who do research in young onset dementia specifically. So they advise the Knowledge Center about the choices that have to be made regarding research. And the scientific board doesn't work alone. They also use the consumer panels that are already in place with the Dutch Alzheimer's Society. So the questions people encounter living with young onset dementia, the problems people encounter are put forward to the scientific board, and also the scientific board uses the consumer panels to discuss research ideas and things like that. So there's an interaction between people living with young onset dementia and the scientific board. And one of the results of the past year has been, next slide, has been the development of a young onset dementia research strategy for the Netherlands. So for the next upcoming years, we have a roadmap of how we go, which topics should be addressed in research in the upcoming years, which questions are already answered, and which research questions have not yet been answered, and should be the focus of research projects in the upcoming years. So I'm very proud that we have this research strategy, and above all, that the research strategy is a product of people living with young onset dementia, telling what they find important together with researchers and healthcare providers. So this will guide us in the upcoming years. Next slide. And currently we're working on in establishing a young onset dementia research consortium. We want to involve the Knowledge Center together with the Alzheimer's Society and the research groups currently working in the area of young onset dementia to together do the things that we have established in the research agenda. So I think this will help us take things further regarding the research projects in the Netherlands in the area of young onset dementia. Next slide, please. But let's talk a little bit about a research project that I'm particularly proud of, because I think it's a research project that engages people living with young onset dementia. And the research project is called It Can, so it really can. And well, the aim is not so much involving people, but I'll get to the aim shortly. But the research project is an initiative of people living with young onset dementia, a care provider in young onset dementia, researchers, students, etc. as well. And the research project has been established through what we call a learning community. And a learning community is not so new, but a learning community is very helpful in doing research projects that you want to do together with people living with young onset dementia, involving family members of a person with young onset dementia, also healthcare workers, students, teachers, researchers, as well as representatives of the municipality. So we have established a learning community, and in talks about what people with young onset dementia found difficult, they said, well, we want to improve care and support during the transition period from home towards nursing home care. People find it very difficult, that particular period, that transition period, and also it's very important to match the care and support in that particular transition period. So the learning community chose to address this particular topic, and we designed a study to help put this forward. And we wanted to involve people in every aspect of the project. So we wanted to involve people in formulating the research questions by discussions with people living with dementia. We also wanted to involve them in the design of the study, but also in performing study activities and the dissemination of the project results. So, well, I found this wonderful object on the internet, so I don't hope I infringe on any rights using this particular puzzle, but I like it because I can use it to explain to you in how we, in which different roles we put people living with young onset dementia in this particular project. So maybe the next slide. We have for this project a project team, and the main topic of the project team is that they have to lead the project. So in this project team, we have people living with young onset dementia also in the project lead. And it was difficult to find a person living with young onset dementia, with dementia themselves. So in this particular role, we have a family member together with a specialized nurse and senior researchers, and together as a group, they lead the project. So that's an important choice we made. Next slide. I told you already the learning community, and in the learning community, people with young onset dementia and family members have a role of participant of the learning community, but they also have an important role as co-creators. Yeah, together with healthcare workers, students, etc. They co-create the research questions we want to address in the project. They co-create the way how we go about it, whether or not we will have focus groups, whether or not we'll have interviews with people living with young onset dementia or not. So we have to decide on several aspects of the project. You can only imagine that when we put this to the financiers, they get very anxious because it's an emergent design. In the community, we develop the study. So those funding the research project want to know exactly how the project will be during the entire course. But it's an emergent project, and I think it's essential that you have an emerging project so you can have a better fit with answering the questions and going about it in the right way. But well, we eventually got funding, but it's difficult. Next slide, please. Also, we have a family member who is actually part of the research team and will also be one of the action researchers. We'll answer the research questions using something we call action research. So we have a junior researcher, a specialist nurse, and also a family member who will actually perform the research during the project. And they will be guided by senior researchers from a university, the university I'm working at, as well as the University of Applied Sciences, and what we call in the Netherlands practorates, but I don't know if you have those in the UK. So because we also want to have the learning community remain after the project has finished, and we also want to, how do you say, help provide people in the learning community with the appropriate knowledge to go forward with the action research after we have left. It's very essential that the learning community can go forward. Next slide, please. Also, we have people living with young onset dementia in the role of advocates. So in the community, it's very important that people learn about young onset dementia, but also learn about the results of the project and the choices we've made and the products that roll out of the project. So together with policy officers of the community, of the mayor's office, we'll have people in place to tell people about young onset dementia and what choices are important in caregiving in young onset dementia. Next slide. we also wanted to involve, or we want to involve people living with young onset dementia in the role of teacher to healthcare professionals about young onset dementia and what is important in young onset dementia. So luckily for this, we have another wonderful project in the Netherlands, which I'm project lead also of, is the Unicity project. And in the Unicity project, we've been able to establish specific educational programs for healthcare providers who are involved in young onset dementia. That's doctors, psychologists, case managers, nurses, and we have these training programs already in place. And in these training programs, people with young onset dementia and family members of young people with young onset dementia actually are teachers. So in this particular project and the results of this project, we can easily incorporate these in the educational project programs of the Unicity project. So also it's important to make cross connections between projects and the infrastructure that's already in place and also have people, well, I'll not go into that. Next slide, please. Well, the final role, we also want that the project is monitored. And we also need participants, we need subjects. So through the care organization that's involved in this project, we'll have a family council of the care organizations who will monitor the project as well and the choices we make. And they're also represented in the learning community. And we will also have people who are living with young onset dementia and family members, as well as healthcare professionals from the care organization who will be involved in the project as a participant, as a subject of research. So in a nutshell, this is, I think, a wonderful project that will, well, in which I hope you can see that how we have tried to engage people living with young onset dementia. So that's about it for me. So I hope I've kept in the time. And please, if you do have any questions, put them in the Q&A, or you can email me as well. That's no problem at all. So I'll give the floor back to you, Mary.
Our second talk today is by Hare and Dr. Wendy Mitchell. Hare is co-director at Innovations in Dementia, and her particular interests are the empowerment and inclusion of people with dementia and the application of research evidence to practice. Dr. Wendy Mitchell was diagnosed with young onset dementia in 2014 at the age of 58. Following diagnosis, she now raises awareness around dementia and is also the author of the Sunday Times bestseller, Somebody I Used to Know. Their talk that they're delivering together is titled People with Dementia, in the Driving Seat of Research. What does it mean? Okay, so over to you both.
Good afternoon. Good afternoon, everybody. And thank you very much for that introduction. Wendy, can I just ask you if there's anything else you'd like to add about yourself? That was quite comprehensive.
Oh gosh, no, I think I'm just a member of everything to do with innovations and DEEP and so many other things as well. But I really have a passion for research.
And you live alone, don't you, Wendy?
I do.
Choice?
Yes, I live alone in Yorkshire.
Okay, thank you very much. And as Mary said, I'm co-director at Innovations in Dementia. We're a small not-for-profit organisation, all working from our homes, even before COVID. We don't have an office, but we cover the whole of the UK. And the thing that sort of binds all our work together is our commitment to helping people with dementia to have their voices heard. So if we could go on to the next slide, please. We're going to talk today a little bit about the Dementia Inquirers programme. And this came about because for a number of years, people with dementia had been saying to each other and saying to other people that really questioning why they couldn't actually run their own research on topics of their own choice and in the ways they wanted to do it. So we took that question on board, and we're very fortunate to be funded by the National Lottery to actually set up dementia inquirers about a couple of years ago. And the idea of the programme is that people with dementia are leading in every aspect and engaging with others or asking for support from others if and when they want to. So it kind of turns the whole concept of engagement on its head, really. And that's why we use the term people with dementia in the driving seat. We all know this isn't going to be easy, but we're testing out the concept, and we want to learn about the barriers and the benefits of this kind of approach. And Wendy, you're one of 6 people who are helping to shape the programme at every stage.
No, that's right. We're not naive enough to think we can suddenly become researchers, you know, because research is a very complicated process. But what I soon found out when I started to have a passion for research is that as a participant, so many things were wrong that I knew could easily be put right if they listened to the people that they were wanting to be participants. So when dementia inquirers came along, it was our turn to look at the whole process from the other side of the desk. And we learned an awful lot about the complexities that's involved. And we knew that we would have to develop our own research pack, which we've done with the Dementia Inquirers Research Pack, to simplify the process, to simplify the language, and to make it more accessible for us to do. And when we have problems, for example, the ethical process is just a nightmare for academic researchers, never mind for us. We were able to call in our allies, our professional allies, to come through our door and sit on our side of the desk and to ask them questions. And we have some wonderful allies in Tom Shakespeare, Dawn Brooker, all who are highly qualified in their area, but we're highly qualified in our by experience area. So the combination of the two is a win-win situation. And that's how we work at the moment.
That's great. Thanks, Wendy. Yes, I mean, you mentioned some of our allies and supporters, and we've never actually had a kind of formal board of academics supporting us. What we've done is somehow gather all sorts of enthusiastic and encouraging people around us, not only from the dementia field, but also from the wider disability field, which has been a fantastic help, because we've been learning about how people with mental health issues, or people with physical disabilities, or people with learning disabilities have been leading the way in this area, not only being subjects of research, but actually leading their own research. And that's been a fantastic motivator, really, I think, for the people who've been involved.
Yeah, I think we need to be at the forefront of every committee, every research group that meets, and not just the one of us, which it often is. We're often just one person. And that makes the pressure on us very difficult, because we don't, some days aren't very particularly good like today. And if we knew there was other people with dementia carrying on the work, it wouldn't put so much pressure on us So within dementia inquirers, we're all people living with dementia, and the pressure amazingly has gone because we accept that someone might be feeling less well that day, but the rest of us can continue and can bring that person in as and when we feel they're able.
Thanks, Wendy. So I mentioned that Wendy was one of 6 people living with dementia who are really shaping the whole programme, and they've chosen the name Pioneers for themselves. And their role is to, as I say, to develop every aspect of the programme. And we've gone off at some amazing tangents, which, as Christian said, you know, you need to be able to have that flexibility if you really are listening to what people with dementia are saying. And luckily enough, we do have that flexibility. So within the programme budget, we've got a budget which will fund a number, maybe up to about 20 of small projects, all of which will be led by groups of people with dementia from the DEEP network, the UK network of dementia voices. And summer before last, the Pioneers selected 10 first projects to be carried out, all on topics chosen by the groups. No topic was given, they could select their own topic. And those projects all got going. And now, of course, some of them were hit by COVID, but 3 of the 10 have managed to deliver their reports so far. And we expect the findings from most of the rest of them to come in the next few months. And they've actually made amazing efforts to change their methodologies, even sometimes to tweak their questions so that they didn't have to ditch the project, which has been great. And the Pioneers, we worked out with them a way in which was simple and accessible for them to score those projects who applied and to decide which ones were selected. So that was another sort of pioneering piece of work. As Wendy said, we did produce the research pack. Have you got that there, Wendy? Just so you can...
I have, but I don't know if people can see me.
Well, the link will be on the last slide, so maybe a bit higher. That's right. So that's free download for anybody, but please give your feedback. That's the price you pay. We ask you to pay if you download it.
And many researchers have asked me for a copy simply because they find the language easier to follow through than their own academic packs. So, you know, if researchers find academia difficult and the whole process, then look no further than our pack.
Absolutely. So all of the small research projects that are part of Dementia Inquirers have received that booklet and have used that research pack to help guide them in choosing appropriate methods for their particular research question. And for example, there are some sample consent forms, there are examples of simple questionnaires, and there are explanations of how to get going with different approaches. Now, we're not suggesting that this can, you know, bypass the many years of training and experience that full-blown academics have. We're not suggesting that at all. But we do feel that having the research pack is empowering for people with dementia and means that they can get some understanding of how you actually begin to address a question that you feel passionate about. The other thing we did, Wendy, was we came up with this gold standards for dementia research. We're both holding that up now, so you can't forget it. And again, that's on the link on the last slide. And as Wendy explained a bit, we realised that all our projects have to be ethical, and some of them may need to go for ethical approval, formal approval. But that was very daunting and scary, incomprehensible for all of us, really. We didn't know which committees to go to, what the language meant, how to apply if you're not linked to a university. It seems very, very difficult to do that. And yet we didn't want that to be a barrier. So we took the bull by the horns, went back to scratch and tried to work out for ourselves what we felt were the key principles that underpin an ethical research project, and how they can be translated into practice for people with dementia. So I don't know if you want to add anything about that, Wendy, or maybe just mention the 6 principles that are on the cover.
Yeah, well, we've found, or I found when I've been asked to be a participant, that often ethics works against me, which makes it unethical, because I'm quite capable of making my own decisions. And the ethics process has said that I can't, because I live alone, for example, in a couple of studies, you had to have someone living with you and to take part as a double act. But I was quite capable of taking part on my own. And I also went before an ethics committee, as I'm a co-researcher for York University, and going before an ethics committee was, I was astounded at how the researchers were so frightened almost. You know, should it be like that? So when we put our booklet together, again, we simplified the language, we simplified the process, and our 6, what's the word?
Principles.
Principles are working in real partnership, because, as I said before, often you feel a bit like a token gesture. Respect and knowledge and acknowledgement, safety and well-being, because that's, you know, we accept that there's a reason for ethics. Informed consent and capacity, confidentiality and anonymity, and information that is simple, accessible and open. Those 6 principles just encompass all that ethical standards should stand for.
Thanks, Wendy. So we would really urge you all to have a look at those gold standards. It's a dynamic document. We know that we haven't got everything right, and we'd love your comments, your support, your feedback. And in time, we really hope that actually the research ethics committees and also the peer-reviewed journals will accept the standards as evidence that a project is ethical, though that obviously won't always obviate the need for approval. But we'd love funders, for example, to require projects that put in their bids to have actually been through the gold standards in advance and really think about what it means to be ethical from the point of view of a person with dementia.
Can I just add, Philly, that when I went before the ethics board for another project, they'd never had anyone with dementia. They'd never even had a carer on the go before them. And so they directed all the questions at me simply out of fascination, I think. But they saw the need to be a bit more open-minded and to actually look at people with dementia in a different way. And I hope many more people with dementia, especially with young onset dementia, will feel confident enough to realise that they can work alongside researchers like we're doing in Dementia Inquirers, so that they can choose the topics that they want to choose, because often, you know, they're chosen for us, and that they can do so much more than they're led to believe. And Dementia Inquirers gives us that confidence to see that with support, because yes, we need support, of course we do. But with support, we can be a valuable member of a research team.
Thank you, Wendy. And as you said at the start, Wendy, it's very important that we don't just have a token person with dementia, or that we hear as many different voices as possible. So we're going to finish now with a short film clip which shows several other of the pioneers just talking about their experience of helping to shape dementia inquirers.
The pioneers are just a few people living with dementia who have been working together with Innovations in Dementia to develop and oversee the Dementia Inquirers research projects. Ultimately, we want to put people living with dementia into the driving seat in research, choosing what matters to us in research and designing and carrying out that research. We want to, I think in the words of other people at the moment, we want to take back control of our research and of our lives. And we need to get it done.
I'm very tired and lots of information, but it's better to be tired and involved than sitting home being tired because you're doing nothing. And it's worth being tired to help to change things for myself, for my future, and for other people's living with dementia's future. So
I'm very proud of how far we've come in such a short time, and I'm looking forward to the future. But I'm also very grateful we have our allies to assist us so that we stay on track and know that together we are stronger, working together, sharing knowledge.
I would have thought people with dementia would ever be in this position. And I'm so happy to be one of those people taking part in this groundbreaking initiative and creating new perceptions through research. But how exciting to be inviting researchers and other professionals to walk through our door instead of walking through theirs. It will be our voices asking the questions, our voices setting the agenda, and our voices setting the priorities. After all, why not?
Thank you, Jackie. So if we can just have the final slide with the link there, where you can find all the resources that we have produced so far. And as the reports come in from the small projects, we will obviously be publishing all the findings on this website as well. So what I was just saying before we saw the film was we've got a year to go, and we're very keen always to collaborate with others, to work with other universities or academics, to work on particular issues such as the ethics issue or how to make research methods more accessible. So do please feel free to contact us if you've got any ideas. And just like to finish by saying a huge thank you to Wendy for coming today. Thanks.
Thank you. And to you.
Thank you. So our third talk today is by Clare Mason and Professor Jan Oyebode from the University of Bradford. Clare is a dementia care trainer and public and patient involvement lead at the University of Bradford and leads a group of people living with young onset dementia and their families. She is currently working with people with dementia to design, create and deliver a module for the Masters in Advanced Dementia Studies. And Professor Jan Oyebode is Professor of Dementia Care at the Centre of Applied Dementia Studies at the University of Bradford and is a registered clinical psychologist. Her career has spanned NHS work, teaching clinical psychology trainees and researching. Her current research focuses on ways of supporting people with dementia and their families to live well in the community. So they're presenting together, and their talk is titled Involving People with Dementia in Research at the University of Bradford Centre for Applied Dementia Studies.
Thank you, Mary. Hi, everybody. Yeah, thanks for inviting us to talk today. So, as Mary said, my name's Clare Mason, and I'm a dementia care trainer at the University of Bradford in the Centre for Applied Dementia Studies, and I'm going to be talking to you today with my colleague Jan. So as I mentioned, I'm a dementia care trainer at the centre, and I'm also the patient and public involvement lead, leading our work with the group that we call our Experts by Experience, which has been named by them. During our talk, first of all, we'll tell you a little bit about what we're going to cover in our talks. Thank you. Next slide, please. So yeah, we're going to talk a bit about who we are and what we do, how we work with people living with dementia at the centre. Our Experts by Experience were involved in creating stories of good and poor care for a project called What Works in Dementia Education and Training, and how Experts by Experience were involved in videos about messages on young onset dementia for a study called the Angela Project. Next slide, please. Thank you. So yeah, so thinking about how people with dementia are involved in our work at the centre then. So we've worked with people living with dementia and their families for many years in all areas of our work, and we've increased this over recent years. People work with us in our dementia research, obviously, as we said, and in our education, such as our dementia masters programme, and with our PhD students as well. And we have in our dementia training, so we've got many long and short training programmes, including educational courses for GPs, hospital staff, care home and hospice staff, and many others who work across the dementia care workforce. So most recently then, we've worked hard working with our Experts by Experience to make sure that this isn't just a tick box tokenistic exercise. And we now work with people to find out what we should be researching or delivering training in, what should be included in our education programmes, and how we should be doing it. So not just what's included, but how we should be doing that. And people with dementia and their families are co-applicants in many of our research projects and will be in all future projects. Many have created training materials with us, such as those that we developed for Health Education England, which are mandatory for all NHS staff. And our Experts by Experience speak with us at conferences after we've written and created the materials together. So it really is a joint working process. So through listening to what people with dementia and their families have told us, we've over the last few years we've reshaped the way that we work with people living with dementia and their families. And we now hold regular meetings to not only find out how they think we're doing, for us to find out how they are, and for people to feel connected as a group, because that was one of the things that they said they wanted. They wanted, rather than to be just a panel, they wanted to have that group feel. And also to find out if they think that what we're doing is in their best interests, if it really is what people with dementia and their families want, and if it's actually going to make a difference to their lives in the future. And we also work hard to make sure that people are kept in the loop and that they're, given that ongoing continuous feedback. And in December last year, 10 people with dementia assessed the dissertation proposals of our master's degree programme students. And Michael, who you'll hear from later, worked with us on our stand at UK Dementia Congress, and he also presented with us on our research. And more than 15 experts by experience are currently working with us on a project that Mary talked about, so in creating a brand new module for our education programme. And the group have set the subject for the module and are starting to work on creating the materials. So that's really is going to be a module that is led by people living with dementia. And in our later slides, Jan will tell you a bit more about some other work that people are involved in, particularly in research. Next slide, please. Thank you. So you can see on the screen one of the pages and a couple of the pages of our newsletter. So people with dementia are now writing articles for our quarterly newsletter and regularly let me know what should be included in it. And we also, before that newsletter goes out, as Wendy mentioned earlier, the language that things are written in and the way that they're written is really important to make sure that people with dementia can read it, understand it, and want to read it again in the future. So we check that out with people before it goes out to make sure that it really is dementia friendly and person centred. So as I said, we hold regular meetings, and we most recently started having bi-weekly meetings with people with dementia. Unfortunately, they're online, as we all know. That's the way to go at the moment. And it became a lively debate about memory assessment and how it's done, and more importantly, how people think it shouldn't be done. And that topic rumbles on. So for a number of years now, we've been working at making the University of Bradford more dementia-friendly place to be, and our experts by experience are an integral part of that. And particularly people living with young onset dementia who are working with us in terms of employment and dementia, and in setting up support for people living with dementia who might work across the university. And also we're setting up a carers network for staff, as well as intranet and intranet pages and other resources. So the last slide for me, please. So here you can see an example of our centre blogs. So our experts by experience regularly contribute to our blogs, which are on the centre's web pages, which our experts by experience are also in the process of giving us some fantastic feedback on how we can make those more appealing, update them and make things easier to find for people with dementia as well as for everybody else. So this helps us to make sure that the topics which are important to people are also what's important to people living with dementia and their families, and that we continue to make sure that the voices are not only heard but are, you know, the centre of what we do. And a quick plug, anybody that wants to join our experts by experience group, I think my email address is on at the end of these slides, so I'm going to hand over to Jan.
Okay, thanks, Claire.
Thanks, Jan.
And next slide, please, Jackie. I think actually one of the blogs that you just saw the front page of was written by Julie, who I think is here today. So say a quick hello to Julie. So I'm going to talk about the way that people living with dementia have been involved in a couple of research projects, just to give some idea of how that works in our centre. And the first project I want to talk about was called What Works in Dementia Education and Training. And the project aimed to find out what training people working in health and social care had in relation to supporting people with dementia and their families, and also aimed to find out how effective that training was. And as part of this, we set up a group of people living with dementia and family members, And that group met throughout the project and had support and facilitation from one of the researchers. And the group worked on various aspects of the project, but I'm just going to tell you about one aspect. This group wasn't restricted to a project to do with young onset dementia. So we had people of various ages in that group, and it included some people who had young onset dementia. So on the screen here, you can see a storyboard, and the storyboard is showing a story about a scenario taking place in the lounge of a care home or in a daycare setting. And the story shown was developed by the project group of people living with dementia and family members. And it combines a range of people's real life experiences into one composite scenario. And what I'll do is I'll just read this out to you, and then I'll tell you how we used it in the research project. So the story was this: it's 11 AM and Christine and Ella, two women with dementia, are sitting next to each other in a day room. No one else is sitting nearby. And for most of the following hour, Ella's lifting the fabric of her skirt and looking at it in a puzzled sort of way, while Christine appears to be having a conversation with someone who isn't actually there. At times, she replies to herself in a different, deeper tone of voice, and she often mentions someone called Bob. She talks mainly about a time when she was injured and had to have stitches in her leg, and her hearing aid is in upside down. Ella doesn't talk much, but every now and then she tries to start a conversation with Christine by asking a polite question, such as, "When did that happen?" But whenever Ella does this, Christine's face takes on an angry expression and she replies in a harsh voice. Ella looks as though she's about to cry, and a passing member of staff says, "Play nicely, girls." Ella says she wants to go home and that everything was better back home where she used to help out at the mission. At 12 o'clock, another member of staff tells Christine and Ella that they can have either shepherd's pie or fish and chips for lunch. "You don't like fish," she tells Ella. Ella replies, "I like saltfish, I just don't like your white fish." So what did we do with this story? Well, we had 6 of these stories for different settings, and all of them were based on all these real life experiences that people had had. And we wanted to know whether staff understood person-centered care. So we selected whichever story had the best fit with the work setting of the staff that we were going to be meeting. And then we met with those staff in a focus group and we presented the appropriate story. And then we recorded the discussion with them. And we asked them, what problems can you identify here relating to each of the people involved? And what suggestions do you have for things you might try to improve the situation of Ella and Christine? And from the discussion, we were able to really pick apart whether the staff had a person-centered understanding, and that person-centered understanding had been contributed by the experts by experience who'd jointly written the stories. So next slide, please. I'd like to just go on to another example, which is about our work with people living with dementia and family members using video. As you'll have gathered from what Claire said, people in our group have a huge range of experience between them, and the experience is really valuable for conveying what it's like to live with dementia. We want health and social care staff and researchers to be able to appreciate and empathise with this experience when they are involved in researching or delivering care. So one thing we've been fortunate to do is to record videos with people living with dementia who've generously given their consent for us to use these in our teaching and our research. So in this example, we're talking about how we've used those videos in a project called the Angela Project, which aims to improve diagnosis and support for younger people with dementia. So it's a young onset related project. And from the research in this project, part of the research we analysed it to draw out key themes about the needs that good services for people with young onset with dementia meet. And in the middle of this slide, you can see a page from the Young Dementia Network website, which lists 8 key needs that people with young onset dementia say good services meet. And we wanted to highlight these key messages, and we thought this would have much more impact if we could bring the needs to life in the voice of people living with dementia themselves. So we took our existing videos that people had contributed, and we were able to take out clips which illustrated the key needs. So what we're going to show you now on the video is Michael, who you can see on the right-hand side of this screen. And he's talking about his experience of having dementia and how important it is that people with young onset dementia have specific advice about their type of dementia from professionals who really understand it. And so we're going to finish our presentation with just 90 seconds of Michael talking about his experience. So if you could do us the video, Jackie, that would be great.
If they're going to talk to you, they should look it up. They should read all about it. If they're going to have to, consult with you, they might know dementia, they might know Alzheimer's, but because they're different, what would you call it, strains or different branches of it, and they're actually lost with that. Well, to me, if somebody's going to treat you or somebody's going to work with you, they should learn about your form of dementia or whatever it is, and then they can work out plans to help you. I mean, mine's not so much memory, mine's visual and perceptions, and I can't work out speed, I can't work out distance. I have problems with puddles. To me, they're holes. So they should start learning, try and get you to overcome them, to work with you with them. A lot of doctors and a lot of nurses and a lot of these, when you say you have dementia, they think, oh, he's forgetting things. It's not always that.
So thanks very much. I think our last slide just gives our contact details, and we hope that gives you some sort of idea about how our work is really enhanced by having people who live with dementia and family members fully involved in all aspects. I'll hand back there to Mary. Thank you.
We have a number of questions. Thank you everyone for putting your questions forward in the Q&A box. These have been passed over to me, and in this panel discussion we have Dr. Christian Bakker, who is our first speaker today, and we have Professor Jan Oyebode and Clare Mason joining us. So we have a few questions for Christian's talk. So thank you everyone at home who have put these questions forward. And one question relates to the research strategy in the Netherlands and whether this is published.
Yeah, it is, but unfortunately it's in Dutch. But for those who want to access it, you can find it through the website of the Dementia Knowledge Center, Young Onset Dementia Knowledge Center in the Netherlands. We'll put the link in the notes of the meeting, I think.
Brilliant, thank you, Christian. And there was another question related to funding as well. So how does it work with funding in the Netherlands for these sorts of projects?
Well, the particular project I was talking about is funded by the government. We have a dementia strategy, and together with the dementia strategy, there's funding for research projects, so you can apply for government funding for such projects.
Brilliant. And there was a further question actually about how funding for these sorts of projects differs from the Netherlands to the UK. So Jan, do you have any comments on that?
Yes, I can comment, and I don't know if Christian might have anything additional to say too. I mean, I'm not sure how it compares with the funding situation in the Netherlands, but it is a difficult situation in the UK. There's only one funding body that specialises in funding dementia care research, and that's the Alzheimer's Society, because the other big Alzheimer's research funding body, AI UK, funds research on cure rather than research on care and services. And the Alzheimer's Society, we apply to them into a competition for funding. And this year, because of the pandemic, they had to cancel their funding rounds, and their income's been affected by the fact that the public aren't able to donate in the way they usually would, and a lot of research fundraising events aren't taking place the way they usually would. We can also apply for government funding to the National Institute of Health Research and to research councils, but we're always in competition, not only there with other dementia researchers, but with researchers on every other health issue that there is. So it is a difficult situation.
Mm-hmm. Thank you, Jan. There was a question for Christian again, related to the uptake of volunteers in the Netherlands, and whether you have many volunteers for research projects who are living with young onset dementia or who have been affected by young onset dementia.
Well, that's rather difficult to find people who are willing and able to participate in projects, I think. So that's sometimes a struggle, and I noticed one other question in the Q&A about why replace a person with dementia with a family carer. But sometimes we don't find someone who is willing to enter the project team or the research team. And also, as Wendy expressed, sometimes people will not be able to participate during the entire duration of the project. And such things as being a researcher in the project for 2 years is quite a commitment, and people with dementia often say that's too long a period, and they're anxious that they will complete the entire course of the project. So that's sometimes a struggle.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because I can see that there were a couple of questions on that, and I know from my experience as well, I've been quite fortunate in some of the projects I've been involved with, where there have been people living with young onset dementia who have wanted to get involved, but it's not always the case, unfortunately. And I'm hoping that after this event today, that this will inspire more of you who are watching at home, who may not have been involved in research before, to get involved. Fantastic. That there were a few questions relating to the material of today's event, and we are recording it, and we will be uploading the recording onto YouTube. So there will be a recording made available that we will send out to all of the attendees of the event today. And yes, in relation to some of the other documents as well, we'll make sure that those are shared with you too. There've been lots of questions, so I'm just having a quick look at the ones that have been prepared.
Can I say something, Mary, while you're looking through?
Yes, of course.
I just wanted to let people know that Young Dementia Network has one of its focuses is on research. And in 2018 and 2019, we held 2 events. And I think, as Mary mentioned, this project grew out of one of the first of those events. But we held these 2 events where we brought together people living with young onset dementia with researchers. And we asked people living with young onset dementia about their priority topics for research. So we haven't a formal research strategy, a cohesive research strategy around young onset dementia in the UK, but we do know from those events and from some subsequent networking through Young Dementia Network that 3 topics came out as very important to people with living with young onset dementia, and they were about employment issues, issues for families, and issues around training and education of health and social care staff. So I just thought it might be worth mentioning that work.
Thank you, Jan. I was wondering if you could speak a little bit about the videos that you created and the involvement of people living with young onset dementia, and how you found that experience of creating the videos.
Well, I think I shall defer to Clare, because Clare, although you couldn't see her, for example, talking to Michael, Clare did a lot of work with people, sitting down and engaging people in conversation that was videoed and ensuring people felt comfortable with that appearing on a video, which all of us might be a bit anxious about.
Yeah, I would say that we've learned a lot about doing that and the process of doing that over the years. And in those videos, yeah, we filmed them on the university campus using our media centre. And then we've also done some further videos with, because our Experts by Experience group is also a deep group. So we get a lot of support from them, and we've made 5 films for the deep group. So one of the things I would say is that in terms of the interview type film footage that you saw there with Michael, and I know that Wendy has been involved in, and some of the people who were watching. Things like making sure that we send the questions in advance, having that little bit of time beforehand to really explain to people what's going to happen, how we're going to do the interviews, getting them. We spent a bit of time making sure that, you know, they feel comfortable in front of the camera, that they know they can stop at any time, getting them to meet the person creating the film, so the person behind the camera doing the sound. And one of the things that we did when we worked with our media centre was, instead of having several people, as there often is when you're creating films, we narrowed that down to one, so that the person doing the filming was also responsible for the sound and running that side of things. And then I would sit off camera and ask questions, hopefully those that have been pre-prepared with the person with dementia, to make sure they understand the language, etc. And then I would ask the question and try and keep quiet while the person gave their answer, and gave them time to answer. And in that terms of encouraging them to, to let them know that they're on the right track, that it's the kind of answer that, because often people are not very confident in being filmed. It feels really nerve-wracking when it's your first time, especially, doing lots of nodding and reassuring, but without saying anything, because obviously we don't want my voice in it, we want the person with dementia's voice. And then we held a lovely event before COVID at City Hall in Bradford, which is a really nice place to spend time. And we had a lovely thank you event where we showed the films. We gave everybody a copy of the DVD, and also gave them a voucher to thank them for taking part, even though they were given contributions to value their time throughout. But we had that real celebration event, so we could all watch the films, but people were sent them as well in advance, so they didn't get any nasty surprises, because we're not all comfortable, are we, watching ourselves on screen. So that's just one of the examples.
Thank you, Claire. No, it's really interesting highlighting that process and the number of different stages to getting to creating the videos and disseminating them. So thank you everyone for putting your questions forward. Unfortunately, we don't have time during this session to go through every question, but we will be saving them and reflecting on them for this project and reading through them. So thank you very much. So the next talk will be delivered by Dr. Alison Ward and Professor Jackie Parks from the University of Northampton. So Dr. Alison Ward is an experienced researcher leading on dementia arts research such as singing for the brain and storytelling. Her work combines practice and research using storytelling and photography as collaborative and creative ways to support involvement in research with people with dementia. And Professor Jackie Parks, who is one of the co-leads on the project, is Professor of Applied Mental Health and is a mental health nurse and lead for the Dementia and Research Innovation Centre at the University of Northampton. She has expertise in leading public and patient involvement in research, and she has a particular interest in young onset dementia and has been a co-lead on the Alzheimer's Society funded project, the Angela Project, which was mentioned in the talk earlier by Jan and Claire. And Alison and Jackie's talk is titled Designing and Developing Study Proposals with Younger People with Dementia. How can I get involved?
Hello and welcome to everybody. It's really lovely to have you join us this afternoon, and please, as Mary's been saying all the way along, please pop any questions in the Q&A section, and hopefully myself and Alison can pick them up later in the panel discussion. I'm going to open our talk and then hand over to Alison to talk about an example of a project she's developing to give you some ideas about how you might get involved. This is going to be quite tricky because I'm also looking at my own slides and asking myself to move on. So the aim of our presentation is to look at lessons that we learned from the Angela Project. And you've already heard Mary mention the Angela Project, and you've heard Jan, who was also a co-lead with us on the Angela Project. And I've noticed from the Q&A that our PI is actually in the audience today, Janet Carter. So I'm going to use an example of the Angela Project as a way that we put together the voices of people living with young onset dementia, because we wanted them to be at the heart of the whole project. So I'm going to start with that, but really just to draw out ways that we can support people with young onset dementia actually being co-researchers and participants. And then I'm going to hand over to Alison, who, as I said, is going to lead us in looking at developing an early proposal and the thoughts that she's having with her co-leads about developing that project. And then I'm just going to come back at the end to draw out some thoughts about aspects of the process that we have to consider, and how we support people appropriately when they do wish to get involved. So they're the three elements of our talk this afternoon. So as you've heard, the Angela Project was a nationally funded project via the Alzheimer's Society that Mary was talking about, and it started in 2016 and finished in 2020, last March. And we all still work together, and we all still work together on the Young Dementia Network, who is a partner on this project. So it's very pertinent to use this as an example of a project that we've been working on around young onset dementia. And the reason for the name Angela, I think, is really important. It was actually based on a lady who actually was diagnosed at 52, a lady that I was working with at the time. So it's very much informed by personal experience. And I'm not going to go into this slide in a great deal of detail, but just to say that there were two work streams in the Angela Project. Work stream 1 looked at the accuracy of diagnosis, and work stream 2 looked at post-diagnostic support. Dr. Janet Carter led work stream 1, and Professor Oyebode led work stream 2. But one of the aspects that I was particularly interested in and keen to see well developed throughout the project and contributed to in the application process was public and patient involvement. It's something that I'd been developing through my work. Really, it started as a mental health nurse and a mental health researcher working with people with mental health issues more generally. But I spent quite a lot of time and subsequently published ways of actually being able to train people with a mental health issue who are vulnerable, and more latterly people living with dementia, to become involved in research, and developed a training program around that. So I was very keen to see a PPI group involved in the forum, involved in the project, and we were very, very fortunate because we were all thinking along the same lines, and it was very much supported from application process all the way through to the end, with that voice very integral within the work that we produced. So I'm just going to focus on the Angela PPI Forum and the work that was going on at the same time in Bradford, which Claire and Jan have already alluded to. So we'll draw that together for you. So within the Angela project, we had public patient representatives on the steering committee for the project. That was a family carer at the time, and that steering committee was very influential in ensuring that we heard all aspects from very key stakeholders, through medical staff to psychologists, through to nurses, and so on and so forth. But the person with a dementia was at the very heart of all the decisions we made. And alongside that, we ran a London-based forum for the project that was chaired by Dr. Hare from Dementia UK, and which we attended. And the photograph is a photograph of one of our meetings. So it had, you'll recognise Keith when you see him in a moment after us, but we had Keith on the project and other people with a dementia, living with dementia. We also had Alzheimer's Society monitors, and we had project staff. And this group, together with PPI representatives from the Bradford group that worked with Jan and Claire in Bradford to ensure that we had that national coverage, absolutely shaped all of the decisions that we made in the Angela project. And the meetings, we had them 6 during the life of the project, two per year. And at each stage, we took every decision that we were making as a group, as a project team, back to that group to shape the questionnaires, the overall design, and how we might get people involved. And at that point, I'm going to hand over to Alison, because I think what's very important is to think about how we recruit people initially into those projects, and just to highlight some of the thoughts that Alison's team is going through to think about how they might do that.
Thank you, Jackie. I think on to the, have you got a slide for me that you can go on to? Thank you, that's brilliant. So yes, well, it's a real pleasure to speak with you today and to share some information about a project that is in development at the moment. We are in the process of finalising a bid for a research council to go in. So this might or might not happen, but we will continue, because we're very passionate about it, to look for funding for this project. It's a project I'm doing in collaboration with the University of Derby, with my colleagues Professor Clive Homewood and Dr. Gemma Collard-Stokes. And it is it's a slightly different project than has been presented so far. So I hope gives an example of the range of projects that you could potentially get involved in. This is actually to develop research for a new drama-based intervention. So delivering workshops for people with younger onset dementia and their families, or a main caregiver to come to together. So I just want to tell you a little bit about the project and the potential opportunities for getting involved. So we've noticed that we've seen a real increase over the last 10-15 years in arts work that is being delivered to and working with people with dementia. We tend to find that these are mostly delivered to people in the older age group and also those living in care homes. So we felt that there was a real opportunity to pilot something that would be appropriate for younger people with dementia and also people living in the community still. So if we're successful, this project would invite people to attend the sessions in pairs. As I said, a person with a diagnosis of dementia and a family member, relative, or a caregiver, to attend sessions that would be delivering drama-based and creative activities. We also want to carry out research alongside this workshops to look at the potential benefits that might be involved in actually attending workshops of this nature. So looking at, maybe doing interviews, photograph diaries, and things like that. So again, kind of using that creative method to support some of that research as well. And I want to tell you a little bit about the drama workshops themselves as well, so you get an idea of what that might look like. It's based on a technique called neurodramatic play. And neurodramatic play aims to, and it was created to really look at attachment and relationships and communication and supporting communication between people. It has been adapted and used very successfully with older people with dementia. So we're looking at this as a pilot to see how it could be adapted to work with a younger age group. And what's really lovely about this approach is that it is very flexible and uses a whole range of sensory, rhythmic and dramatic approaches in order to look at those issues around relationships and attachment and supporting communication. So we can look at using drama, role play and storytelling. We can also look at using textural materials like sand play or other fabrics that we could touch and feel. Also using sound and music making, and perhaps using the body in terms of movement and rhythm, or even doing some mask work and looking at characterization. So as I said, it is really flexible, and what that means is that we can adapt our approach to make sure that it is that people are engaging in creative activities that they want to engage in, that they enjoy and get some benefit from. It also means that we can be flexible in terms of the themes that we look at through the drama to make sure that they are appropriate for whoever is taking part and that it is suiting their needs in the best way. To give an example of how this might work, it's all right, Jackie, in practice, we might want to look at using sort of fairy tales or myth, for example, and looking at creative ways of doing that. So if we took a story that hopefully we're all familiar with of Goldilocks and the Three Bears, we could look at telling the story and retelling it from a different character's perspective, perhaps changing the way the character responds in the story. We can explore the textures of the hard, the soft, and the just right bed and chairs that they test out. Or perhaps looking at tactile materials like the fake fur, or the porridge, the hot, the cold, and the just right porridge, and looking at the textures and what that means. And the themes within the story that come out that we could explore, I feel are really kind of very pertinent to our everyday lives. They're about looking at comfort and comfort within the home and that sense of safety that we might want to look at. They also look at how we feel connected to others, how we might fit in. And also one of the kind of key morals is around how our actions impact on other people. So we can explore that through the creative activities in a really safe and supported way. I hope that gives an example of how the drama might work. And then I wanted to just, as Jackie said, talk about how different ways that you might be able to get involved should this project be successful. Obviously, there is an opportunity for you to take part as a participant and attend those workshops. But we also want to set up a project panel and take learning from the Angela project and also from the gold standards that were talked about earlier, so that we run the panel in the most appropriate way that is suitable for not only the participants, so they get the benefit of the decisions we've made, but also for our panel members, who would be a mixture of people with younger onset dementia, family members, but also we will have a drama and a dementia expert to come in and give their expertise. And the panel, we would provide training. So if you're new to research or new to drama or any of those aspects, then we would provide training to support through that. That would be one of the aims of the project panel. But we'd really love some support in and to help co-develop the materials that we use in terms of developing the research. So we talked about making sure that the language is appropriate, that the way that information is shared, the design of the information, all of those things are really important to make sure it's meeting the needs of the group in the best way. We'd also want to look at some of the themes that that we might explore through the drama, and what kind of stories we might want to choose or creative methods would be really appropriate. And so you can see there are different ways that you could input into that development of the project. And you would also, our plan is also that you would be able to be part of it right from the very beginning through to making those decisions about how we deliver the research, helping us to analyse the data that we get, and also then present the findings and share with other people what we found out. We also want to then hopefully co-produce a future funding bid that will be informed by practice, so that we could hopefully, if it's successful, roll this out for a larger study in the future. What's been really important with this bid has been having feedback as we're developing it. So I think we've got some people in the audience today, and thank you so much if you're there for your input. It's been so helpful. What we found with that is that it really helped us to develop the language we were using and the kind of level of detail we put in about why young onset dementia was important to research and to have an intervention like this for the younger age group. It also helped us to provide information and kind of more detail about the actual drama and put in examples so people could get a real feel for what it was that we were doing. So that has really strengthened what we've done in our approach to writing the bid. So it is so important, as everyone's been saying, to have that input from people who are experts, in and can advise on what is appropriate for researchers and how we can take that approach in working with younger onset dementia. So I hope that gives a flavour for a potential future project and how you might be able to get involved. So if you're interested or would like more information, please do just let me know. Thank you, Jackie.
So thank you very much for that, Alison. So I hope that's given you all a flavour of how exciting it can be to get involved in projects. But for those of you that are perhaps new to getting involved with projects, you're not on your own if you get involved. There are multiple opportunities to get involved in a small way or a much bigger way, and you've heard the whole range of how people can get involved. But there are training opportunities, so people can be trained in how to be involved in public patient involvement. And the two slides here, I'm not going to go into great detail, but the one on the left is the model that we designed at the University of Northampton, called the Partners in Projects model. This wasn't unique to dementia, but does give an indication of the different elements of the training programme. And a colleague of mine at the college in Oyebode College in Northern Denmark took this model and the one on the right, the Authentic Partnership model, which is unique to dementia. And she developed a combined approach, which I now use and direct people to quite a lot, both if you are a researcher wanting to set up a project with PPI involvement, but also for people to think about how they are being involved and the value and the tone of that involvement. So The model that our colleague Alison and my colleague Dr. Deanna Shaktoft developed was taken from the two previous models and is published. The publication is on the bottom there. So if you are thinking of getting involved in a project, or you're a researcher wanting to involve people in a project, she very much talks about the elements that you need to consider from training all the way up to co-researching. And what Deanna did in her study, she actually got people with dementia to design their own projects and interview each other and disseminate the findings, and it was published in the Danish headlines. So I'm just going to leave and to conclude and leave you with a summary slide that talks about some of the key messages that emerged from our forums in the Angela project, and for you to consider in future projects, thinking about the timings of your meetings. When are people likely to be fresh, not tired? Think about actually putting in for adequate budgets when you are applying to really support people to attend. Make sure everything, I think it was Wendy who talked about getting information well in advance of the meetings, so that you can, if people have time to prepare adequately. Make sure it is really person-centred and not around the research agenda, but that people are involved at looking at timings and agenda that work for them. Make sure there's adequate breaks and refreshments, and continue to support concentration levels. So hopefully there are some pointers there for you. There are a number of tools available. You've already heard about the gold standard. So, there's lots of material out there now, but please feel free to get in touch if you have any queries, or pop anything in the Q&A for Alison and I. So with that, I'd like to thank you for listening.
So the final talk of the day is going to be delivered by Keith Oliver. Hopefully you've all had a chance to have a very short break there. But Keith Oliver was diagnosed with young onset dementia in 2010 at the age of 55. Since then, he has written and spoken widely about his experience of life with dementia. He's an Alzheimer's Society ambassador, an NHS dementia envoy in Kent, England, and was an active, enthusiastic member of the advisory group for the Angela project. Keith is also a member of the steering committee of this project, the DEFIN project. So Keith's talk today is titled Living with Young Onset Dementia, Growing Through Engagement and Connections.
Thank you, Mary. I'm very grateful to you and the other organisers for inviting me along this afternoon to speak. And at the weekend, when planning my part of the workshop, I wanted to write and present something which would be interesting, useful, but also challenging the audience who are listening, alongside my need to find a creative way to plan, write and deliver. Speaking of creativity, this amazing cushion on the next slide, please. So first slide. This amazing cushion was embroidered by a dear friend who works at Canterbury Christ Church University, who I taught 35 years ago in primary school. She showed it to me as a tribute to both Tom Kitwood and to me, which was immensely touching, and I use it today to platform the Kitwood flower, which for me is so fundamentally rooted in all I do and seek from life, including the care and support I need to thrive and keep dementia at bay. Next slide, please. Although, as it says there, give you the child to the age of 7 and I'll give you the man. Although young onset dementia makes life so much more frustrating and difficult on some days, I am still fundamentally the very same person now, age 65, as I was in this infant school photo, which was taken soon after my 7th birthday. As an ex-primary school teacher, traditionally 3:20 would be a time when we'd settle down with me telling a story. Well, today's story is structured using a narrative therapy technique inspired by something called Tree of Life. And the next slide, please, illustrates the elements of the tree. I have received this as part of a Young Onset Dementia project within our Forget-Me-Not group in Canterbury, and subsequently supported psychologists on training NHS staff and students in the use of this technique. Since lockdown, I have received this form of therapy via video in a one-to-one with a private psychologist, which I find very helpful in supporting me with my dementia and anxiety. So there we have the tree. My deep roots are firmly in the north, having been born and raised in Nottingham. And then I spread my roots to seek nutrition for my mind and soul at the University in Sheffield, and then on to Cheshire, where I felt rooted in my new career as a primary school teacher. In 1981, I was uprooted by a mixture of my wife wanting to return to her roots in Kent and an attractive job offer. So this tree was transplanted to live and grow in Canterbury. As far as today is concerned, this tree is 10 years old. For that is how long ago it was when I was diagnosed with young onset dementia. And my subspecies, using a tree analogy, is Alzheimer's disease. I have given you a sense of the roots in my life story. Now to spread my roots further, I have always been a driven person, enthusiastic, energetic, loyal, and arguably, even back as a child, was seen as a leader. I have always been keen to learn, and I feel that applies to today's conference as much as to everything else I take part in. I bring to my current life with dementia some of the skills and experience I was fortunate to gain during my professional life. Some lessons were good, and I filed them in part of my brain to use later. Others were not good, and I learned probably more from them in what not to do, and I still use this in my roots today. My roots nourish my general approach to life and towards other people. I am a 100% advocate of social justice. I hate unfairness and any hint of prejudice or biased, unfounded favoritism. I increasingly speak from my heart as my cognitive thinking is now affected more by the Alzheimer's. My philosophy is firmly based upon team, and the cliche that there is no I in team is so true. The best aspect of my life from the past 10 years has been getting to know some amazing people. And some of them are here today, either on the panel or I notice in the audience. This helps keep me firmly rooted in the ground. So now to move from the roots to the ground. I try and remain grounded in my present life, which is in Canterbury with my wife, who's with me today in the room, where day to day I do various activities to turn the soil in my garden, and as an Alzheimer's Society ambassador and Kenton Medway envoy, I dig into the world of dementia and occasionally plant ideas in the ground for myself and others to see grow. I enjoy seeing others flourish and become more confident by developing skills and attitudes which better enable them to both work and engage with not just me, but with others. And this PowerPoint display today was helped by Nishat, who's with me today, one of our undergraduate students. Whilst I seldom feel content on my own unless engaged in something useful or creative, I am much happier when connected to a friend or family member, when I can maybe share some of the successes and challenges that I face. My view of my trunk is that others often see it differently from me. I used to have a positive, balanced, healthy self-esteem, but Alzheimer's and occasionally other people cause my strong trunk to bend and sway with turbulent gusts of wind. I know with as a prop as support, I've still got a range of skills, strengths and abilities, one of which is hopefully in evidence today around being creative, thinking carefully about things, and then writing and delivering what I hope is a reasonably interesting and useful talk to professionals and other people affected by dementia. I also want to challenge the oxymoron that people with dementia can no longer develop new interests and abilities. I see this every day, both in the stigma and misplaced stereotypes, but also in the fabulous people I know who also have dementia, but are witness to the fact that the condition does not have them yet. And that is the realistic aim, that professionals who are going to be part of a person's care package will help us to keep dementia at bay for as long as possible. While some of my cognitive abilities are not as sharp or readily available to me as previously, which is why I'm reading from a script, whereas as the teacher I described at the beginning would not have done so, my emotional intelligence has, I feel, actually improved, and I'm still, like everyone, as intelligent as I was before. It's just that the key needs to be found to unlock the door for this to happen for me. Or rather, the trunk needs to be hugged in normal times to enable me to feel strong. Within the pet therapy I have received since diagnosis, I have been reminded to care for myself as well as to care for others, which I do more readily. Self-soothing is something I need to be reminded to do. If I do, then I am more resilient, and the trunk will not need props or ties to support it, but will be strong and straight. As I branch out into my hopes, goals, wishes, and dreams, these revolve around staying well physically and emotionally, maintaining and making new friendships and connections, not letting anyone down, hopefully being well enough to resume some travelling when the world becomes a safer place, and to trying to be happy and content in myself. If dementia gets the better of me, then I know I risk letting others down as well as myself, which I try desperately not to do. I have hopes, goals, wishes, and dreams, which are both ambitious but also realistic. Next slide, please. This is me. This is my tree. It is summer in my tree, and I'm so lucky that it is full of leaves. There are many important people in my life, each adding a different shape, size, colour, texture to our connection to each other, starting with my family, my wife, my 3 grown-up children, and 3 rapidly growing up grandchildren, one of whom I saw, Jan, on the slide you showed earlier with that lovely little film that we did together. Then to the many friends who I respect and treasure their friendship, and many of them are professionals working in the field of dementia, including those with us youngsters who share our brain with Alzheimer's and its various insidious allies, all of whom blight the tree and can cause the leaves to wither and fall. The best thing for me since being diagnosed are these leaves, as they simultaneously give me shelter from the strong sunlight and from the rain and storms. Many of these friendships started as what I call professional friendships, and have blossomed into a mix of professional and personal, which if both parties are happy with and share mutual respect, then the friendships flower for us both, and we can generate, share and celebrate our gifts together. I hope that what I bring to this is a little wisdom, lots of experience, a dry sense of humour, wide reading and some retained intelligence, great empathy for the other person, and central to all of this, I bring the gift of love in the way that Tom Kitwood wrote about it, and which I, along with Reinhard Goose, who was able to add to in the updated version of the seminal text Dementia Reconsidered Revisited, where the flower I showed in slide 1 featured strongly. Writing is a gift I like to share, and this is made easier and much more fulfilling for me when I can have support to do it. On to the next slide, please. With these fruitful connections and friendships, I feel physically, emotionally, and psychologically safe. This better enables me to be receptive to others offering and giving me their many gifts. 2 recent examples are linked to a fabulous poetry project called Time and Place. And there you can see on the slide 4 books which I've been privileged to be involved with. The Time and Place project culminated in this fabulous book, which you can buy on Amazon for the bargain price of £4.99, with all of the profits going to DEEP. I co-led this with 2 very dear friends, Liz, an author, and Jess, a postgrad now studying at Exeter. Here the fruits of their labours and their gifts were shared with me, not least of which their love and their friendship, alongside their commitment to the project, and then to the group of people with young onset dementia who wrote fabulous poems, and also to the 4 undergraduates who became our writing buddies to support us by sharing their literary and personal gifts around patience and tolerance. Finally, as my autumn of life moves forward and we reach the seeds, I do hope to have made a difference and to leave this world a better place than when I first grew in it. I mentioned being a teacher earlier, and I've always wished to leave a legacy of tolerance and learning. And as a friend once described me, once a teacher, always a teacher. So the seeds of learning from me can form strong trees, which will help make tomorrow better than today for everyone affected by young onset dementia. Thank you so much for listening this afternoon. And now I'm going to join the panel. Thank you.
Brilliant. Okay, so thank you everyone for coming back for this final panel discussion of this event today. We've had a number of questions come through, and also people thanking the speakers today for their presentations. So yeah, but thank you very much from them, and also from me for your talks today. There are a couple of questions that have come forward in relation to Alison Ward's proposal. There was one question related to the activities and the fact that you mentioned that you'll be working with pairs of people living with dementia and a family supporter. They were just wondering why you chose pairs and if there's any flexibility in that. Yeah, just related.
Yeah, of course. So the choice of the pairs was really related to the neurodramatic play, in that it is an approach that focuses on communication and relationships, and it's an attachment-based model, and so it lends itself quite nicely to working with pairs, but it doesn't. That's not to say we couldn't be flexible with it, and we wouldn't accept someone who came on their own. It might be that we would think about. We just need to think about it in a slightly different way, but that was the rationale, because of the approach of the neurodramatic play, which is and the rationale for that is that it's a technique that Professor Clive Homewood is an expert in as a drama therapist. So
can I come in at that point, Mary? Is that okay?
Yes, of course.
Are the pairs, they don't have to be couples, do they, Alison? Could they be?
No, they don't.
Any combination of it?
Yeah, they don't have to be couples. So it doesn't have to be husband and wife, or it could be a friend, or it could be a daughter, or something like that. And I think also, it comes a lot from some of the reading we've been doing, and what people have been saying about how people would like support within the family network as well, and so that really has sort of fed into as well the choice of the neurodramatic play, in thinking about how we can support people within the family unit as the dementia progresses, in order to support those relationships and communication, which can sometimes be affected.
Mm-hmm. Brilliant. Thank you very much for that. There have been a few questions about where these workshops will be based. So will they be just in the Northamptonshire and Derbyshire area where the partners are, or will they be will there be opportunities elsewhere?
Yeah, so at the moment, because we're going for a pilot to see how it would work, and make sure that it is an appropriate approach to use. We were thinking initially just doing something more local, but we are incredibly excited about it, and kind of already thinking, probably maybe a bit too ambitiously at the moment, but we would like to be able to deliver this more nationally in the future. So that would be the idea of developing a future funding call, so that we could put in a bigger project. But the way funding works, which I'm sure my colleagues will also be able to say as well, is that sometimes you need to test ideas out and show how they work and show the benefits before funders will agree to do a big national study. So that's the idea behind it.
Brilliant. Okay, so there's been a question about reaching different societal groups. So, for example, looking at gender, race, religion, and whether there have been any attempts or any challenges in reaching out to different groups. So, Jackie, do you have an answer?
Yeah, I'll come in on that. Primarily, I mean, I live in the Midlands, and I've access to a number of cities, obviously in the Midlands area. And while I'm aware that, and actually Alison and I at the moment have got a proposal under consideration where we've been asked, if you like, to consider recruiting from other Black and minority ethnic groups, BAME groups, into that project. And I know that the question isn't just about BAME, but I'm using it as an illustration. It's actually proved quite challenging. I know we tried quite hard, and I don't know if Janice is still around and on the panel, but we tried quite hard to recruit from different groups for the Angela project. And recently I've had a student who was looking particularly at Afro-Caribbean people with a dementia, and obviously therefore younger groups, and we didn't have enough people in the area to recruit from, so he was struggling to recruit. So it's not to say that those groups aren't out there, but certainly there are challenges in trying to get that diversity across the board. And I know certainly we are looking at that actively as a Midlands university, and I know lots of other universities are, but it isn't always easy. I don't know if anybody else has got anything to add on that.
Three Nations Dementia Working Group have had the same issue, really, to try and recruit members to that. And one way we tried to do that was by having 2 webinars on the BAME community. One was during Black History Month, but we certainly didn't want to appear or indeed think that we were tokenistic. So we ran a second one outside of Black History Month, and we'll probably run another one. Because that's the risk, I guess, that you do one of these events and then leave it to move on to other things, understandably. But it's such a big issue. We want to really keep revisiting it and keep encouraging it.
Yeah, absolutely. And I know certainly that in the past, I again, I've had another student who was looking at young onset dementia and learning disability and the interface across those groups as well. So they are areas that we have endeavoured to work in, and obviously in future projects we look at the whole diversity and inclusion issue to make our studies inclusive. I mean, certainly my own work in developing the training was actually a positive endeavour to access people with mental health issues to become involved in research, and that was quite unique at the time. But it isn't without its challenges, and I know that several of my colleagues have worked quite hard at that, and it's not just us, it's nationally.
I was just going to say that I think the more researchers we have who come from all sorts of diverse backgrounds, the easier this is going to become, because, you know, there's nothing like seeing people that you can identify with inviting you, and it makes all the difference to trust and how you feel about the relationships.
Yes, absolutely.
Yeah, and role models as well.
Yeah, yeah.
I was wondering, Christian, not to put you on the spot, but I was wondering if you had a similar problem in the Netherlands, or if you'd managed to recruit a diverse population.
No, unfortunately, in the Netherlands we have the same issue. That's really a challenge to involve people from different backgrounds in research projects. So I haven't found a solution for that yet.
No. Yeah. If anybody's got any suggestions, I'm sure for future projects, you know, people would be very keen to tap into that. You know, and we do talk to the DEEP group and other groups when we are trying to recruit.
My colleague Sadia Parveen, who does a lot of research with South Asian populations, has found social media quite a good way of recruiting. You know, with younger generations, people who are living with young onset dementia, if people are on Twitter, word goes around very quickly. I'm a bit live in the age before Twitter, so I've resisted being on there yet, but she does manage to recruit a lot of people from via social media.
Yeah.
Thank you all. There's been another question related to whether there are any adjustments made for people with aphasia who may struggle with speech in research studies. So have you had any experience with that, Jackie and Alison?
Yeah. So I'll just make a quick comment on that and then let Alison come in on that. I think it's about the diversification of the methods that you use. So it's about creating materials and opportunities for everybody to get involved. So when we did the Angela project, I very naively thought, I was quite ashamed really, that everybody would want hard copies of the questionnaires and things to review, and that people would struggle with online forms. And actually, Keith will probably remember this, everybody said they wanted online forms, and when we did the data collection, we did it as an online survey. So I think it's not necessarily about taking account of everybody's challenges, but actually being open to adapting to everybody's needs, and therefore ensuring that that voice is heard in whatever way it's expressed. And there are multiple ways of doing that, like Keith's Tree of Life. So, Alison, I don't know if you had anything to add.
Yeah, it's a really interesting question, because so much of what we do in research is, is based on written or verbal communication. If you think about the ethics process in itself, the level of information we have to give out in information sheets, whether they're online or hard copy, it's really heavy material that people have got to look at and understand. And so I think, that's where I think some of this creative engagement can really support. We can think about different ways, maybe videos that show or images incorporated into information documentation that can help people to understand. And I think that's a really important way of working. And then thinking about some of the creative activities that we do, in terms of, not just in terms of research, but in terms of the interventions or activities that we offer people. The creative arts is a wonderful way of communicating that doesn't necessarily involve written or verbal communication. You can communicate through body language, through music, through rhythm, and things like that. And I just wonder if there's more learning we can take from those aspects into the research side, that helps us to engage with different groups with different, as you say, different needs and abilities. So yeah, I think there's a lot we can do to learn from that. Still, we're learning.
I just wanted to add onto that something that you said, Keith, which has become my mantra for the last couple of years, ever since I first met you, and has sort of become embedded in a lot of the work that Alison and I do. And it's that understanding and appreciation of learning new skills.
Can I come back on that one, Mary, and crave indulgence, because I finished a bit early in my talk. I deliberately did so because I wanted to save something until the end. And Jackie's just given me a fabulous opportunity to do this. This book is amazing, and it came out of COVID, and really it would be a fabulous research project to look at the way that people with dementia responded to COVID and expressed themselves through poetry. I'm just going to share with you two short poems. One was written during the project and one was written after the project. And I think that makes an important point as well, particularly to commissioners who commission projects and then think, well, what benefit do they have long term? Here we have evidence to show that people are still writing poetry beyond the project. The first one is a haiku, and many of you will know that haiku are 3 lines, 5 syllables, 7 syllables, and 5 syllables. And the poets involved all had dementia, and they all found syllables difficult, but they all did a great job. This is mine, which is not so great, but I want to share it with you. It's called Friendship Matters. Friends pass through our lives, filling our hearts with their love, stays with us forever. And then something to close today and hand it over back to Mary. I wrote this with World Smile Day in mind in October. Something to think about during COVID times. It's called Smile, and we could all do with encouragement to do that. Laugh and smile. Stay a while. Grin a smile. Improves your profile. Beam some smiles. Travels for miles. Flash a smile. Admire your style. Grin a smile. To reconcile. Twinkle a smile. Like a bride down the aisle. Chuckle a smile. Once in a while. Humour with a smile never fails to beguile. Love with a smile makes living worthwhile. I close my case.
Thank you very much, Keith. And thank you to all of the speakers who have given up their time and have prepared their talks for today's event. Yeah, very grateful for all of your input. And as well as the speakers, I would like to thank the audience members as well, who have been very engaged in the Q&A session. And all of your questions have been saved, and we will reflect on them as a project team and make sure that they are used throughout the project. And as I mentioned at the start of this event, that this is an 18-month collaborative project, and this event today forms the first part of the project. So we're hoping, as a result of this event, that we'll be creating public and patient involvement groups so we can research together with people living with young onset dementia. So we're hoping that the talks today have given you a flavour of some of the different opportunities, different ways that you can get involved in research. So I'd also like to draw your attention to the Young Dementia Network for those who are not yet aware of it. So the Young Dementia Network are a community that includes people living with young onset dementia, their family, their friends, people affected by young onset dementia, as well as organisations and professionals who work in the field. And the Young Dementia Network provide a number of different opportunities for people to engage with, to collaborate with, and they have been one of the key partners of this project. So if you're not already signed up as a member, please do check them out. Check out their website and you'll receive regular newsletters and updates on what they've been up to. So I'd like to thank everyone again for joining us today, and we hope to hear from you soon. And yeah, thank you all again.